Hi, everybody. David Noor back with another episode of our Intelligent Growth Live with my business partner, Jen Cords. Hello, Jen.
Hi, Noor. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Good to have you back. And for our audience, we are continuing a mini series we started several weeks ago. This is a three-part series. If you've missed the previous episode, the first one is focused on strategic value of RevOps, revenue operations. Jen and I have been really diligent students of the space for some time. We start to really dig in, and you see two ends of the spectrum. At one level, it's like BCG, Bain, McKinsey, 50,000 foot. Here's what RevOps is, which is important. It's a great overview of what's happening. And then you get a whole lot of really tactical tool level and not a lot of kind of strategic insights in between. And a lot of our clients are CMOs, CROs, CEOs, business unit leaders who are interested in intelligently, and that's what we do. We enable intelligent and profitable growth we want them to be able to ask better questions and work with internal resources, external partners, and really understanding key attributes we believe contribute to material value creation in the organization from the RevOps function. So the first episode was focused on metrics, and we covered some great insights on the key metrics you should focus on. The previous episode to this one, we focused on dashboards. And Jen was not only kind enough to show several examples and what we liked and what we didn't and what we looked for, but we also talked about marketing, sales, customer success, and RevOps participating in a QBR, the quarterly business review, and the different insights different groups could bring. This episode, we really want to focus on spend because we're having a lot of conversations with executives who, rightfully so, in a tightening economy, in continued inflationary pressures, are always looking at their spend. And these things, all of these technologies, all these tools come up for annual renewal. It happens in our small business, and it happens with every one of our clients. So looking at spend, and more importantly, looking at a return on that investment, on that integration, on that image, on that, and these are just not clever eye terms, but we believe really rethinking or reinventing ROI, we believe is critical. So Jen, again, let me start with you. Overview, impression, why spend matters.
Spend matters, especially in a tightening economy, because everybody's being asked to do more with less. And really justifying what it is you're doing and why you're doing it and the tools that you're leveraging to help enable that really should be put under a microscope so you can justify and have good reason and outcomes based on why you're using that tool.
So great perspective, great view. And we want to share our audience. If you're watching us live, you'll see the slides. If you're listening on demand on the podcast, we encourage you to check out the live. We're going to show and talk through some examples. Also, right after this session, we encourage you to come join us in our private online community called the Noor Forum. Once you join, the left-hand side, there's a RevOps group. Think of it as a special interest group. In there, we post unique content, resources, special events, and we'll put the slides from this session in there for you. We encourage you to download them. We encourage you to ask questions, jump in with your situation. And that's just Noor Group, nourgroup.com/forum. It's our private online community. That's where Jen and I are on a daily basis. She runs the RevOps, both practice for our firm, but also the RevOps group in there, posting great insights. We also repurpose these live streams into our podcast, articles. We have a Forbes column on leadership that Jen and I contribute to on a regular basis. So we encourage you to look into additional resources from this episode that we believe will be useful to you. But in terms of the content, obviously intelligent and profitable growth are the hallmarks, are the pillars, are the enabling, fundamental mindset focus in the subscription economy. And we're big believers of it. We're big supporters. and obviously, hopefully, contributors of it. So, Price Waterhouse recently did its annual CEO survey, and Jen and I were talking about this. It's a fascinating view of executives who share their insights from the environment to financial, societal pressures, and the challenges leaders are trying to solve to remain relevant. And what was fascinating was their biggest outcome, their biggest highlight from this conversation were really the threats to top line. And it's no surprise that CEOs in particular are really worried about the impact to their top line in the next 12, 18 months and the pressure to deliver top line results despite of what's happening in the global economy. So certainly we have a number of clients that have recalibrated, a lot of clients who have revisited their kind of commitments at a leadership team, at a board level. Obviously, as Jen mentioned, how do we do more with less? But at the same token, we're still accountable for delivering those top line goals, delivering the top line results, particularly if you're public market facing. That the earnings report critical, the results critical, and we've seen a number of executives justify kind of where they may have fallen short, and rightfully so because of economic pressures. But top line is still a big concern for many executives. Jen, your thoughts on contributions, threats to top line, kind of what you're seeing from the RevOps side?
What I think, well, one of the biggest struggles that we've been seeing with our clients, and also just what I've been hearing, is that the executives don't know, to your point earlier, what questions to ask. They also don't have all the data at their fingertips. So back to our previous episodes, the metrics that matter, the dashboards, tracking almost in real time, they don't know what they don't know, and they don't have visibility into what is actually happening within the business to help change the course of what's happening with their top line. So they're looking more at lagging indicators instead of leading indicators.
And we believe that's a critical one, and we'll talk more about that. But it's a great perspective on, again, I'm active in the National Association of Corporate Directors from a board level, and early on they drove into us nose in, fingers off. As board members, you're not there to do, you're there to ask. You're there to ask the questions the management team may not be thinking about. You're there to ask questions, to clarify, and really help them see a different lens, different perspective. So your ability to ask better questions, to ascertain better answers is critical as a leader, leadership team, and certainly as board members, investors, so on and so forth. So top line growth is what we're passionate about. By the way, I've never seen a company cut its way to growth. So although we appreciate cuts and they're prudent, they seldom deliver that kind of intelligent, really intentional long-term growth viability. So we get excited by leaders who believe right sizing, absolutely. How do we continue to invest in good times or bad, in gaining market share, in finding net new growth opportunities, in rethinking, reimagining, reinventing our business model? Those are, all growth strategies that we believe and we've seen, including, by the way, mergers and acquisition, M&A, and organic opportunities to really continue to grow when others might be contracting. So in thinking through that approach, there are three opportunities. There are three we call them kind of touchstone paths, if you will, that our team kind of gets involved. Many of our clients are in still expansion mode, whether they launch Series A through E, or if you think of a path to an exit or an IPO. In that expansion journey, value creation, critical value creation processes, capabilities, and again, Jen and her team really get involved in tech stacks. So our focus on enabling intelligent and profitable growth really comes in hand in expansion. Others, as I mentioned, are integrating beyond their organic growth. They're also looking at M&A opportunities and how do we integrate? Those guys have the organization we just rolled up or acquired has some fantastic processes, or they've got a phenomenal set of tech stacks we'd like to integrate. We're talking to a client who just bought a small company, but they had two different marketing, sales, and customer success tech stacks. And they engaged us to kind of help bring both of those together and create one instance of it. And then last but not least, transformation, whether it's iteration, innovation, or disruption of the current business model, of the current go-to-market strategy. We've been, again, I recently had a great visit with the CEO who said, you know what, we've been mostly direct to kind of gain traction. We realized that our scale is going to come from a broader channel partner opportunity. So that's where we also can help really enable the channel partners to leverage the same process or very consistent processes, capabilities, and tech stack. Jen, anything to add on these three kind of touchstone paths?
Really so RevOps in all of these paths really can help amplify what you're doing. And also it helps clean up the data. You have an expression of dirty or garbage in, garbage stays in all of these by creating a strong foundation of your people or your capabilities, your tech stack, and your process. You really create that foundation that the company can grow and scale from. And especially in the last one, the transformation, resetting what that foundation is can then elevate you to a level that you haven't necessarily thought of before. And so it's an important thing to look at and critically, internally as well as externally, like what are we doing and why are we doing it?
And what I'm fascinated is that the strategic value of RevOps in each of these. So as you're expanding, you and I talked about, you go from a digital desert where there are no tools and there are no processes to, functional silos to, okay, we've got now, disparate systems, but none of them talk to each other. And, when everybody's trying to, create control, how do you create transparency? And how do you start to share, proven practices across different functions in the organization? And then what we really love is really mature organizations who are much more interested in benchmarking their processes, capabilities, and tech stack against best of the best, whether they're industry peers or cross industries. And they really come in at any of these levels, any of these touchstone paths, if you will.
Well, and some of those mature organizations, not only are they interested in the benchmarking, but they're also interested in finding those efficiencies that they may not have thought of before. Like, how can we save time? How can we save keystrokes? Because in the end, that focuses their teams on the things that can actually create impact versus the small minutia that may just be taking up time.
And it's critical. And again, it also lends itself really nicely to our current episode on focus on spend. So if you haven't seen this is our customer lifecycle journey maturity model. We have, through countless interviews, through our own research, through our own advisory work, what we've identified is in the subscription economy, the idea of a linear selling rhythm might as well be prehistoric, because a recurring revenue model by definition demands a 360-degree view of that customer journey. So for every organization to understand how are they creating awareness, how are they creating engagement, if you have a product-led growth PLG strategy, the on-ramp there to evaluation, buying, why they buy, when they buy, how they buy. And for years, I've coached every client that the relationship really starts when they buy. So stage 4 cannot be seen as the finish line. We're done. Thank you. Thanks for visiting. I want to thank the Academy. That's it. That's, again, it's a wrong mindset, because that's really when the promises you've made as a marketing and sales organization leading up to 4, now customer success has to deliver in what we believe is equally valuable 5, 6, and 7. Because if you don't create adoption, if you don't create material impact in the business of your customers, you should have no expectation of them becoming evangelists. By the way, it doesn't end at 7. We've, since creation of this and our advisory work, we've expanded it to 8 is kind of a loop on the right-hand side when they renew. 9 and 10 come out the bottom, where they either expand and really deepen the relationship, so they have additional, deeper, if you will, value creation. And then certainly 10 is global. So if I'm doing this domestically, there's some nuances in taking the same value proposition, taking the same journey to global markets. And we want to leverage our global experience in helping clients really think through those as they go to market. Jen, anything to add on the lifecycle journey maturity model?
I would just say that companies, when they're looking at this, we're currently doing a research study on strengths and struggles. And we're asking our clients, as well as other CEOs, CROs, and CMOs, of where they feel that they're strongest, but then also flipping the coin and where they're weak. But then asking them also, if we asked others, how do they perceive that you show up? And would it be consistent with what you already have identified? And so that consistency across every experience is what we're looking for. And the other part to this life cycle is that as we work with teams, it's really creating that efficient motion between each of these stages. It shouldn't be stilted at all. It should be a smooth handoff, like a relay race and passing of the baton. So helping teams create processes that remove that friction between each one of these stages is also really critical to the work that we do.
So if the customer lifecycle journey is kind of our methodology, it's our thought leadership, the logical question that often comes up is, okay, so I get it, like it, the research is fascinating. What do you guys do? And how do you do it? And how do you get involved? So Jen, talk a little about, if you could, the ATI process.
The ATI process is really where the rubber meets the road. And this is where me and my team will come in. And generally we like starting with the baseline assessment. Even before the baseline assessment, we recently launched something called an X-Ray. It's a week-long examination with mutual NDAs and sysadmin access, where my team and I will get in and we'll look at your capabilities, processes, and tech stacks, and really identify the impediments that you're facing that are keeping you from growth. And those findings are things that your internal team can help you address. You can take those findings and work with others. But we really feel that since we have that cursory view and that holistic foundation, that we're really suited to help you all resolve those issues quickly and come to a success in a more expedient fashion. But then from that, to start this ATI, we actually do something called a baseline assessment, which is a little bit more in depth. It's 30 to 45 days, same thing, mutual NDAs, sysadmin access, but we really dig into your people, processes, and tech stack and look at not only what's working and what's not working, but why not, and the other things that you could do to improve. And we make recommendations, short, medium, and long term, that would help the company grow and scale in an intelligent and profitable way.
And what I love is again, for the audience, we can talk more about baseline shortly, but you have some very specific deliverables from the baseline assessment. Talk about those three for a quick second.
Yeah, so from the baseline assessment, because we have that sysadmin access, we're able to create a process map and an alignment analysis. So marketing, sales, and customer success need to all be working in lockstep. And a lot of companies, there's some level of friction or disconnect. And so that process map helps show the organization how things are moving from one function to the next, but then also how we are or are not aligned, and then a recommendation on to get alignment. One of the other things we develop is also a system architecture. So it gives you that lay of the land, and you can understand what technologies encompass my growth engine. And then finally, we also look at a capabilities elevation roadmap. So the people you have today may or may not be in the right roles to help you scale in the future. So it helps create that hiring plan, if you will, as the company grows and scales and the business changes, to make sure that you have the right people in place at the right times along this journey.
And what I also appreciate from this amplified time to impact, from that baseline assessment, you and your team can jump in anywhere with, I think you guys call it point solutions. So whether it's a user journey or let's create dashboards, as we did, we talked about in the previous episode, or help, create a tighter integration so our data is more, we can visualize our data, or we have a greater level of credibility and repute with our data. but also fractional support where it's a piece of it, and then ultimately the managed services. So there's several other opportunities to really leverage your team, but it could be anywhere along these 10 critical steps.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that baseline assessment really gives us that foundation and identifies the pieces. And then we can have a conversation about what is actually priority and then focus the team with those other services on addressing that one specific item and or supporting the organization with that fractional support while you hire internal competencies.
Beautiful. So for our audience, if you just joined us, this is a third of a mini series where we focus on the strategic value of RevOps. We did metrics. Previous episode was focused on dashboards. This one, we're going to spend some time on spend. Again, financial industry, economic pressures, inflationary pressures. How do we do more with less? Your CFO coming up and asking between the tech stack and different administrators, we're spending X on these functions. What are we getting for it? So Jen, you and I came up with a list. I'd love to run through the list and then ask you to kind of comment on each one. So we talk about total spend and ROI considerations. Talk about total spend. Why is that important versus kind of either silos or individual tools or anything else?
Well, total spend is really important to identify where you may be overspending. So you could be overspending for a tool and underspending for somebody to run said tool or vice versa. And so looking at the entire number gives you that clearer picture and really focus on what is going to have the most impact. And total spend really encompasses the technology, the person to run the technology, the time and effort it takes to create said campaigns, and so basically everything that comes into play when you're trying to do anything related to the business.
So it really is a holistic view of everything we're spending. It's not just the Salesforce annual subscription or, some tool that we're using. It really is also the team as well as the resources we need to drive marketing, sales, customer success.
Right. And one of the comments that you've made in previous episodes is no company can cut their way to growth. And if you don't look at total spend, you may cut something that's absolutely essential to run the organization or run the technology that then would allow you to grow in a profitable way. And so without this holistic view, you could be cutting something that's absolutely essential.
Comparative spend. This is fascinating. You believe, or we talk to clients about, based on your stage and size of company, really important to understand how are other companies leveraging their RevOps environment?
Yeah, looking at comparative spend, there's something that the ops teams and my team specifically, we call shiny object syndrome. There's new technologies everywhere in the marketing ops space or the marketing technology space. There's almost 10,000 tools, and sales ops, there's about 8,000 tools. They all do different things. There's overlaps, and everybody wants the newfangled whatever, Chat GPT, AI, machine learning. Some of them are more valuable than others, but if you just keep adding things to the tech stack, you're going to get bloat. And so at the various sizes of company, at the number of employees you have, at your revenue level, those sort of things all come into play when you're trying to determine the best mix for your tech stack. And what that spend should be. What should your headcount be? What should your tech be, et cetera? So really looking at this is important.
And as a teaser, before we wrap up this session, we're going to talk about the RevOps Spend Insights, a new service that we're partnering with a fabulous firm to really bring to our clients. And we'll share more ideas on that front with you as well. Next on it is seat utilization. Now, this is important to you because we've walked into some ugly scenarios around seat utilization.
Yes. So seat utilization, again, it goes kind of back to that comparative spend. Organizations want to be as efficient as possible, so they'll negotiate contracts to buy 100 seats because the price per seat is more attractive than maybe only buying 20 seats. But then you're sitting on 80 seats that are not being used for how much time? That's wasted capital, that's wasted seats. when you could be leveraging that money for other things. So really making sure that the people who need access to the tool have access to the tool, and you're not paying for too many seats that are not going to go utilized or used in an efficient way. But you also don't want to run out of seats. So your seat utilization and your hiring plan really needs to be in alignment, so you can be progressively adding seats at the same pace that you're adding people.
We've also seen companies who regrettably, change their business model. So one of our clients literally just got rid of their small business. They just figured out with the churn, small businesses weren't really viable for them. So they got rid of that team. Or another client that trimmed. And now you've got, whether it's sales or marketing people that are no longer with the firm, and you're still paying for those. And when a renewal comes up, you're not, again, you don't have visibility into how effectively we're using those platforms. So seed utilization is a big one. You talk a lot about this tech stack purpose.
Yes, we talk a lot about intentionality in everything you're doing, in your marketing, your sales, your customer success. And when choosing your tools, you also have to go in with a level of intentionality. What is this tool doing, and how is it going to help elevate the business? And don't just look for point solutions. Today, I'm trying to solve X. I'm going to throw in another technology on this. Like, how is that technology going to help grow and scale with the organization versus the small band-aids, if you will? Because when you do that and you just start adding tools, I call it digital duct tape. Your tech stack is literally held together, and you don't quite know how it's all going to fit, and it becomes a house of cards. So intentionality with why you're choosing the tools and how you're choosing them really will come into play when you're trying to set the direction of your organization.
It's very similar to this one and very relevant to this one is this idea of functionality overlap, percentage of use, and department duplication.
Yes. So we talked about the digital desert and then the functional silos. And when your ops team is fragmented, so you have sales, marketing, customer success, all of those functions have tools that overlap each other, and the data within them then also overlap each other. And without RevOps or some sort of higher level of visibility, like a system architecture document that my team creates in our baseline assessment, without that level of visibility, you don't know what other tools the other departments are using, and you could have a duplicate tool. For example, like marketing could have something that's measuring the sentiment of customers or prospects. Well, customer success would have something similar. And if those two departments aren't talking to each other, or the ops teams aren't in coordination with each other, you could implement two tools that are tracking basically the same thing. And so then you're spending double when you could have just expanded the seat count. Back to our point number 3, you could have expanded the seat count and given access to that other function without having to invest in yet another tool in the stack.
This is critical because we've seen exactly that. We've seen one group, without talking to another group, buy another tool because they're not aware of that the one we have does some of those things, or they use and again, we'll talk more about this in a second, a fraction of what that tool is capable of. Gong is a great example. We can capture the audio. I think I've been there when you've recommended the client. Well, did you know you can transcribe the audio and capture those in notes in your Salesforce? Or they had another tool that also was able to capture audio, and they didn't realize that functionality was available to them because that person had left. So we see a lot of this functionality overlap. We see a lot of different functions or departments duplicating some efforts without knowledge or insights or conversations, communication with other groups. Talk about long tail impact versus ad hoc. We talk about band-aids.
Yeah. So the long tail, this comes back to our intentionality with your tech stack. So growing and scaling your people and processes is important. Growing your tech stack along the same lines is also important. And having that system architecture document, for example, allows you to understand the ripple effects of adding or deleting tools within that stack. And it then also helps you identify where you may have gaps within capabilities. So in your previous example about leveraging Gong and the transcription, like how important is that And are there other tools within the stack that can do it? And then you can reduce the number of contracts you have, reduce the number of things that need to be administrated, but you can also then scale with adding functionality within a tool. So getting deeper value from those tools without having to add additional costs, because those additional features within any tool generally come within that package that you've already bought. And so it's no additional cost, yet you're increasing the capabilities of all of your teams by just deepening your relationship with those tools.
I mentioned earlier that I had coffee with a CEO that has a love-hate relationship with Salesforce. And I think it's for one of these reasons, which is over-engineered. Again, very capable environment. We brought in individuals, or we've used other people that have just created this massive, for our audience, if you don't live in Atlanta, we've got 2 major highway intersections. One is literally and figuratively called Spaghetti Junction. The other one we're fondly calling Lasagna Junction, because they are just complexity of them is mind-blowing. But talk about over-engineered hooks in different systems.
Where we mostly see over-engineered hooks is when a team or teams are trying to force functionality where it doesn't belong. And what I mean by that is the organization has defined, let's say, HubSpot as single source of truth, but HubSpot has limited number of fields and capabilities. So they start creating all these custom features and like modules within there to bring in all this other data, instead of just exporting the data out to something more simplistic like a Snowflake or a Tableau that is built to do that. And there's various reasons why people over-engineer things. It could be, I guess, fiefdoms. They don't want to give up, like, I'm in charge of this thing and I want to own it, and I'm just going to keep building and tacking things on to keep control. The other one could be that the company doesn't want to invest in yet another tool because they're not seeing the value from any of the tools that they currently have. So they're just like, nope, make it work with what you've got. And so then you come up with this weird engineered thing, which in the end creates delays and friction in your tech stack and your data that you're going to have to come back and fix in the future. And so by doing it right the first time, you really save time, money, effort later.
Which leads us to the next one. This came from our last, we had a Relationship Economics Summit where we gather C-suite executives from a very broad spectrum of industries and size organizations, and a very well-respected venture capital, private equity partner, and a board member, Eric McCarthy, brought up zero-basing everything and the power of deduction. Zero-based budgeting seems to be a really great idea when we go in and we help clients really analyze their spend.
It is, and it's not something that we see a lot of companies doing today. They spent $1 million last year. That we're going to do $1.1 million this year, and whatever the contract value is from last year, they just renew it at the same rate or try and negotiate something close to that, without actually looking at how well are we using this tool, and are we using it efficiently? Do we need it still? And when your renewals come with your tools, it really is a perfect time for the business to analyze, what are we doing? How are we doing it? What else is in the market that could do the same thing that may be a less expensive option? And so justifying your spend could help find the returns in your investments without having to make too many changes.
And this is, again, this will lend itself really nicely to our conversation around the RevOps spend insights shortly. But let's go to data silos. This is the opposite of over-engineered. It's actually under-engineered, and it leaves some misses in much-needed integration opportunities.
This one we mainly see, again, when we have individual functions with operations teams, and they don't either know how to connect the tools, or they're not in alignment with the other ops functions. They're there to support sales, and they're only going to do their sales focus, and so they're very myopic. And the data silos, this also could lend itself to people doing manual spreadsheets and manual reports. And because those tools are not connected together, they're then having to create more steps for them to visualize that data or visualize whatever question somebody has asked, because those things are not connected, and really creating that alignment between functions. So there is that cross-departmental communication is important, and understanding that having that 360-degree view of the customer and prospect in every function is going to help the business grow and scale more so than, no, this is my data and I'm going to keep it over here and you don't need to see it.
And again, I've always coached leaders to. I had a grad school professor would say, "Hear me now, believe me later," and I coach leaders to think about this. When there's lack of information, people will make things up. People will fill in the blank themselves. So if you're still old school and I recently heard this, that's why I bring it up. That is information on a need to know basis, and you don't need to know. What you're leaving is just enormous amount of room for people to fill in the gaps themselves and make up the gaps themselves. So transparency, this data exchange, data cleanliness, really healthy debate, respectful but healthy debate in terms of not just what we're doing, why are we doing it. The data silos are not conducive to that. And it's a classic case of integration that's much needed to really present a single view. The offensive coordinator sitting in that booth, seeing the entire field, gets a very different look than what quarterback sees, or even what the head coach sees from the sidelines. So the data silos, again, not conducive. And our BizOps practice, where there's data analysis, data hygiene, data visualization, really brings this front and center. Last but not least is ROI. And you and I have sat in on conversations. We've helped clients think about both qualitative and quantitative justifications of their RevOps initiatives, their RevOps investments. Give us some examples of each.
Sure. So CFOs, for example, are always asking, like, why are you spending that? What's being spent? What return are we getting on that? So by being able to answer the question of, we're more efficient because we have this technology, or our response time to customers is better, and it reduces the number of support tickets because we have, for example, a live chat tool. Somebody can come in, ask a question, get a quick answer, go back to what they were doing, versus submitting a support ticket. Support then has to research it, reach out, etc. Like, shortening that response and getting people in real-time answers, like, helps them, the stickiness of your company for one, but then it also just helps them be more efficient leveraging your solution, as well as your internal team not spending cycles on trying to find answers. So that's one example. Another example is cycle times for sales. And so by having data readily available, like the marketing, what did this person engage with? What assets did this person already download or read? That salesperson can then, in their next conversation, have a more intelligent conversation to move them through the funnel and potentially maybe book a demo or book a meeting, because they have that information already at their fingertips and can have the intelligent conversation versus resending something that this person has already seen. And that will help your close rates improve, because now the customer has the perception that this person actually knows me. They're actually paying attention, and they find that they're getting served more value because we're paying attention to all of those smaller triggers. So sales can then have a better success rate. So those are just a couple of the examples that I can think of.
One of the things we found really helpful is an initial conversation with the CRO, with the CMO, with the head of customer success, and how they're measured to be really useful. And obviously CRO, revenue, profitability of that revenue growth year over year, the renewal rate. So the key metrics with which the executives are measured becomes a great conversation starter in how will we measure the ROI for the organization. And if you think about whether qualitative or quantitative, we can shrink sales cycles. If we can increase the average, an old friend and a client used to say, SEAT, sell everything on the truck, right? The average you in the past used to be transaction value, average sales price. Now it's that recurring revenue. If I can increase a premium or create upsell, cross-sell opportunities, certainly the higher we can, our retention, customer acquisition and retention, critical, because dramatically more expensive. In the last session, we talked about in the metrics when we talked about your customer acquisition cost. If we can reduce those, it absolutely helps justify that investment. Earlier, I gave a couple of different definitions of ROI. So return on integration. What's the value of effectively integrating your processes, your capabilities, and your tech stack without having to add additional technologies? What's the value of return on image, where in the eyes, the heart, the mind of that prospective customer, you really look like you have your act together? Versus we know companies that will go unnamed where sales couldn't be more clueless into the customer experience journey and the frustrations that the customers, existing customers face when you call them and you're trying to upsell them, on another module even before the renewal. So you dilute your credibility. It is a reputational risk if you don't have a 360-degree view to that customer. And certainly last but not least, return on involvement. Is this a functional silo, or does everybody feel like they have a vested interest in the holistic view and the journey around that customer lifecycle that we brought up earlier? So these are some of the spend categories that Jen and I talked to executives about. CMOs, CROs, CEOs, include increasingly CFOs who are more strategic about the investments and the initiatives and where and how do we double down on critical growth enablers of our business model. And we want to bring to your attention a fairly new service and a partnership we call Revenue Spend Insights. And there's 3-4 things that we want you to take away. One, what if we were able to really focus on your annual spend on just your tech stack? So look at your sales in RevOps tech stack, your Salesforce, your HubSpot, your Gong and 6 Sense and any and all of these tools and technologies you're spending on a recurring annualized basis within your RevOps tech stack. What if we were able to analyze it? What if you had benchmark data against other companies and the spend, the terms, the conditions of what they were doing? And what if you had support in your negotiations, in your renewal, in your, again, not the cheapest, but optimizing the total value that you and your organization get from that spend? That's exactly what we're doing through a phenomenal partnership, and would love to talk to you about it. We'd love to, if it's relevant to you, if you have renewals coming up, many of those you want to start negotiating several months in advance. So imagine a calendar that gave you a set of timelines that you wanted to focus on. So the RevOps Spend Insights is a fairly new service. We'll send you links to more information about the X-Ray that Jen and her team offer, the assessment that really goes in deeper, the point solutions where we can come in anywhere along that amplified time to impact and solve a problem, the fractional support where it's on an interim basis, or I just need a point solution, I just need help in a particular area. And then, of course, managed services. This is our portfolio of RevOps services, which we believe can and should be very strategic to your growth strategy. Jen, any closing thoughts before we wrap up this episode?
Well, I would just say that as people are hearing this and the plethora of options that we have, I would say don't get overwhelmed. Starting is the first step, like having an assessment or having an X-ray done, and the willingness to even see what's happening is really important to this. And it's always going to be iterative. RevOps and your ops strategy and your growth can never be a George Foreman where you can just set it and forget it. It's something that you constantly have to fine tune as the business grows and scales. So don't be overwhelmed with RevOps in general. Just choose one objective and start focusing on that to make improvements. And then with time, you can tackle the rest.
Jen and I hope this mini-series on the strategic value of RevOps have been of interest and value to you. If you missed any of the previous episode, you can watch them on demand in the NOR Group's Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter accounts. You can also listen to each episode on demand in our Anchor, our podcast, wherever you consume podcasts. The first one was on metrics. The previous episode we did was on dashboards, and this one was on spend and ROI. On behalf of my partner, Jen Kors, my name is David Noor. We're with the NOR Group, where we're doubling down on intelligent and profitable growth for our global clients in the subscription economy. RevOps is critical to that. You can learn more about us at norgroup.com. I hope you'll come back and join us each Tuesday at noon Eastern for future episodes of Intelligent Growth Live. Thanks, everybody. Look forward to seeing you soon.